You are nothing to us. My daughter said it calmly, like she was commenting on the weather, holding the keys to my house between her fingers. They caught the light as she turned them once slowly, as if to be sure I saw. My son laughed from the other side of the table. Don't worry, Mom, he said. We'll FaceTime you when we're celebrating. On the table, between a cold cup of coffee and my folded scarf, lay a document. Date March 14th. Amount $412,000. Signature mine looped and confident. But I had never signed it. In that moment, something inside me went very still. They weren't just pushing me away. They were already living as if I didn't exist. How could they do this to me? And if you want to hear my full story, subscribe to the channel because from here on it only gets worse. My name is Linda Parker, and I was 64 that spring, the kind of age where people start speaking to you a little louder even when you can hear just fine. I lived in Scottsdale, in a stucco house that still carried my husband's choices in it. The brass porch light he insisted on polishing every October. The mesquite tree he planted with the boys from next door. The little dent in the kitchen doorway where he once tried to carry in a dresser alone and failed. Mark had been gone 9 years. Heart attack on an ordinary Tuesday. One minute he was reaching for the pepper grinder. The next he was on the floor with my hand under his head, my voice too calm for what it was saying. After the funeral, the world kept its schedule. Bills arrived. The roof needed repairs. The water heater chose that week to die like it had been waiting for drama. I went back to work because there was nothing else to do. I worked in accounts at a medical supply company, the quiet kind of job where you notice patterns and fix small problems before they become loud ones. I stayed there 26 years, long enough to watch managers come and go, long enough for the carpet to be replaced twice, long enough to earn a retirement that looked good on paper and felt smaller in real life. Emily and Ryan were my whole reason for any of it. They were 13 and 11 when Mark died, old enough to understand loss but young enough to still believe it would be temporary if we behaved well. I kept the house because it meant stability. I kept my grief private because it meant they could eat dinner without seeing their mother fall apart. I did the late-night homework checks, the soccer tournament drives, the orthodontist payments, the Christmas mornings where I smiled until my cheeks hurt. When they grew up, they left like children are supposed to. Emily went to college in California and discovered a version of herself that didn't call me every day. Ryan bounced between jobs and cities, always certain the next thing would fit better. I was proud of them in the way mothers learn to be, quietly in the background, cheering without demanding a front row seat. And still they came back to me when life buckled. Emily called after her first divorce, voice neat and controlled. Mom, I just need somewhere to land for a few weeks. Those few weeks became 4 months. I didn't mind. I cooked her soft foods when her stomach clenched with stress. I paid the deposit on a new apartment without asking how she'd pay me back. I told myself it was what Mark would have wanted, though the truth was simpler. I loved her. Ryan showed up with a moving truck he hadn't paid in full, a grin that tried to make it funny. Just until I get on my feet, he said. I let him store boxes in my garage, even when the cardboard scratched my car and the dust made my throat itch. When his car got repossessed, I co-signed a loan. When he missed a payment, I made it quietly, like sliding a bandage under a sleeve so no one has to see. Somewhere along the way, my help became an expectation. Not gratitude, not partnership. Just a steady assumption that I would smooth whatever rough edge appeared. They didn't ask if I was tired. They didn't ask if I had plans. They told me things and I adjusted. Emily became efficient with her affection. She hugged me with one arm while checking her phone with the other. She spoke in short sentences that sounded like decisions already made. Ryan became charming when he needed something and absent when he didn't. He called me Mama in public, loud enough for people to smile at us, and then forgot my birthday the next week. I noticed these things, of course. I am not foolish. I simply believed that love meant patience, and patience meant swallowing the small hurts before they grew teeth. I kept certain comforts close. Mark's old ceramic mug with the chipped rim, the lavender hand lotion by the sink, the photo of the 4 of us at the Grand Canyon when the kids were still small enough to sit on our shoulders. I told myself families shift, that adulthood makes everyone busy, that my turn for ease would come later. But later has a way of arriving like a stranger. That day at my table, Emily with my keys, Ryan with his laugh, and that document between us, wasn't the beginning. It was the moment the truth finally stopped pretending to be anything else. Aunt Carol had always been in the background too, Mark's older sister with the careful smile and the habit of correcting my stories. Linda exaggerates, she'd say at holidays, even when I was only describing the drive. After Mark died, she stayed close to the children, sending them checks, advice, and little reminders that blood had its own rules. I didn't argue. I thought it was kindness. Looking back, I see how all of them learned the same lesson. If Linda hesitated, you simply stepped around her. And if she spoke up, you called it worry or age or stress. And you moved on without listening. Quietly. The first real crack was so small I almost didn't hear it. We were sitting in the kitchen, the afternoon light sharp and unforgiving, making every crumb on the table too visible. I remember slowly stirring my tea in Mark's old mug with the chipped rim, listening to the refrigerator hum its familiar, tired note. Emily wasn't looking at me. Her eyes moved past me instead, toward the cabinets, the window, anywhere but my face. "Mom," she said casually, as if it were an afterthought, "you've been forgetting things lately, haven't you?" I smiled. I truly smiled. I even shrugged the way people do when they have nothing to hide. "Everyone forgets things," I said. I thought about the keys I sometimes left in the wrong drawer, the glasses I found in my purse instead of on the nightstand. Small things, ordinary human things. But Ryan didn't laugh. He stood a little apart, leaning against the counter, staring at the floor. Not at his phone. Not at me. At the floor itself, as if there was something there he didn't want to see but couldn't avoid. His silence was too careful. I didn't understand it then. I made a joke, said at least I hadn't forgotten my own children's names. Emily nodded quickly with relief, as though a test had been passed. The conversation moved on to her work, to Ryan's plans, to how it was time to think about the future. Now I know that wasn't a joke. It was a trial. Gentle, almost tender. They were watching to see if I would object, if I would bristle, if I would raise my voice. They were watching to see whether I would defend myself. I didn't. After that day, other small things appeared. Emily began asking more often whether I had already paid the bills, even though I had paid them on the same day every month for years. Ryan once took my mail to help organize it, and I later found the envelopes opened, folded too neatly. Around that same time, a new app appeared on my phone. For safety, they said. Just in case. I allowed it. I always allowed it. A quiet unease settled inside me, like a cold draft in a house where all the windows are closed. I felt it when I was alone, folding laundry or watering the plants on the porch. But I told myself it was fatigue, age, loneliness. I searched for explanations that didn't require me to act. Now I understand that this is how things begin that later cannot be dismissed. Not with shouting, not with force, but with a soft sentence spoken in an even voice, and with a look that slides past you, as if you are already slightly gone. After that, the changes came quietly, disguised as concern. No one announced them. They simply appeared, one after another, as if they had always been there and I was the one who hadn't noticed. Decisions were made before I arrived. Conversations ended when I entered the room. Plans were discussed in lowered voices and finished with polite smiles. I learned about things after they were settled. A family trip that had already been booked. A repair scheduled for my house that I hadn't requested. A change to an insurance policy I didn't remember approving. Each time the explanation was delivered in the same careful tone, patient and rehearsed. "We didn't want to burden you. We thought it would be easier. This is what's best for everyone." Those words became a refrain. Best for everyone. Not best for me. Never that. The safety app on my phone began sending notifications I hadn't turned on. It tracked my location, my steps, my sleep. Emily showed me how it worked, her finger moving quickly across the screen. "See? Now we'll always know you're okay." I nodded, even as something tightened in my chest. I had lived alone for years without incident. I had managed grief, work, money, and illness without supervision. Still I nodded. Small things started going missing. My spare car key was gone from the bowl by the door. A folder with bank statements vanished from the drawer where I kept it. When I asked, Ryan waved it off. "We're just organizing, Mom. You have so much paperwork." His smile was easy, practiced. I felt foolish for questioning it. At night, the house felt different. Not unsafe, just unfamiliar. I would walk from room to room, touching the backs of chairs, the edge of the counter, grounding myself in what was real. I listened to the hum of the refrigerator, the ticking clock in the hallway, the sound of my own breathing. These were still mine. I told myself that. Yet I began double-checking things. The lock before bed. The balance in my checking account. The calendar on the fridge, where new appointments appeared in handwriting that wasn't mine. I told myself it was temporary, that my children were only trying to help. That love sometimes arrived clumsily. When I tried to push back, even gently, the air shifted. Emily's mouth would tighten. Ryan would sigh long and theatrical. "You're overthinking," he'd say. "Why are you making this harder than it needs to be?" And just like that, I was the problem. The obstacle. The difficult one. I stopped arguing. Not because I agreed, but because arguing required energy, and energy was being quietly drained from me. I conserved it the way you do when you sense a storm but don't yet see the clouds. I focused on routines. Morning walks. Grocery lists. The familiar weight of my keys in my hand, though there were fewer of them now. What I didn't know then was that while I was adjusting, they were advancing. While I was choosing peace, they were choosing control. And while I was still living my life, they were already practicing how to live without me. I found out my house had been listed for sale on a Tuesday, the kind of plain day that usually carried nothing more dramatic than errands. I was looking for a phone number in my email. Something about the dentist's office, and an unfamiliar subject line caught my eye. Listing appointment confirmation. First I assumed it was spam. Then I saw the address. My address. I clicked, and there it was in black type. Scottsdale, Arizona, my street name spelled correctly, the zip code correct, the little note about desirable neighborhood that made my stomach turn. A realtor's name I didn't recognize. A date and time. And the phrase, seller to be present. Seller. I stared at the screen until the words went soft around the edges. Then I stood up so quickly my chair legs scraped the tile. The refrigerator hummed. My mug sat half full beside the sink. Everything in the kitchen looked normal, which was the cruelest part. I opened my browser and typed my own address the way people do when they're trying to prove something wrong. A real estate site loaded in seconds. And there was my house, photographed from angles I had never stood in. The front walk with the mesquite tree. The porch light mark used to polish. The living room with the rug straightened like a hotel. The guest room staged with white pillows I didn't own. Even the hallway photo of the Grand Canyon was gone, replaced by a generic print in a frame that looked like it came from a warehouse. They had been inside. Not just inside, preparing. My throat went dry. I scrolled and found the listing price. I won't pretend numbers don't matter because that's how they measured me in the end. The price was set just under what the house might have brought in a careful market. Quick sale. Clean exit. The kind of decision you make when you want results fast and questions later. My hands shook as I searched for the paperwork. I went to the drawer where I kept my folders. Tax returns, insurance, the deed. Only to find it half empty, as if someone had already taken what they needed. I checked the closet shelf where I stored old statements in a banker's box. Gone. I called Emily first. She didn't answer. Called Ryan. It rang and rang until it clicked to voicemail. I didn't leave a message. I had the sudden sense that any words I offered would be used like clay, pressed and reshaped into whatever story they were already telling. Instead, I drove to the realtor's office listed on the email. I don't remember the radio. I don't remember the traffic lights. I only remember the weight of my keys in my palm, and the way my fingers kept searching for the spare that used to be there. The office was bright and smelled faintly of citrus cleaner. A young receptionist looked up with a practiced smile. "Can I help you?" "Yes," I said. My voice sounded steady, which surprised me. "I'm here about the listing at." I gave my address. Her smile hesitated. She typed, "Oh, yes, we have that file." "I need to see it," I said. She glanced toward a glass-walled office. A man in a crisp shirt stood and came out, holding a folder like it belonged to him. "Mrs. Parker?" he asked as if we'd met. "I'm Linda Parker," I said. "And that's my house." He nodded too quickly. "Of course. We've been coordinating with your power of attorney." The words didn't land at first. Power of attorney. Like a phrase from television. Like something other people needed. "I don't have a power of attorney," I said. He blinked. Yes, you do. It's all in order. Your aunt, Carol Parker, has signed on your behalf. We have the documentation. The room felt suddenly narrower. I heard the air conditioner kick on. I heard my own heartbeat not racing, just loud. My aunt, I repeated, signed on my behalf. He opened the folder and slid it toward me. Paperwork, tabs, neat initials. A photocopy of a driver's license. A notary stamp. And then the line that made my vision sharpen like glass. Principal deemed not fully competent to manage affairs. Not fully competent. While I was standing there breathing, reading, I turned pages with fingers that did not feel like mine. There were signatures, Carol's, bold and certain. There were forms authorizing access to accounts. There was a disclosure form. And there was one document with my name printed beneath a signature that looked like mine but wasn't mine. The loop of the L was wrong. The pressure too heavy. As if someone had practiced. Then I saw the amount. $412,000. I heard Emily's voice in my memory. This is what's best for everyone. I closed the folder and pushed it back across the desk. Who requested the photos? I asked. The realtor hesitated. Your son met our photographer. Very helpful young man. My mouth tasted like pennies. I thanked him politely. I don't know why. Habit maybe. The old training to stay pleasant, to keep things smooth. I walked out into the sun and it felt too bright, too ordinary for what had just happened. In my car, I sat with both hands on the steering wheel and didn't start the engine. I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror, waiting for it to change into whatever weak, confused woman they had described on paper. It didn't. I was still me. And that was when the pain came, not loud, not theatrical, but sharp and clean. They hadn't only excluded me. They had written me out in ink, stamped it, and begun selling the life I'd built, one staged photograph at a time. I drove home slower than I should have, noticing things I hadn't noticed in weeks. The sag of my neighbor's mailbox, the dust on my dashboard, the way my own street looked like a place that belonged to someone else. When I opened my front door, the house smelled faintly of lemon spray, and the closet where I kept Mark's suitcase was ajar. That night I set purse on the table and stared at the empty key bowl by the door. I understood then that the betrayal wasn't coming. It was already done. I didn't go inside right away. I stood in the entryway with my hand still on the doorknob, listening. The house was too quiet, as if it were holding its breath. The lemon cleaner smell lingered in the air. And it didn't feel like fresh. It felt like erasure. I set my purse on the table and opened it again, as though the right key might magically appear if I searched hard enough. Receipts, a pen, my checkbook, the little tin of mints I kept for long lines. No spare car key. No spare house key. The bowl by the door looked wrong without that small metal clutter, like a mouth missing teeth. I walked room to room without turning on many lights. The living room lamp still worked, but the pull chain felt unfamiliar, as if someone else's fingers had used it. In the guest room, the closet door that I always kept shut was cracked open. The hangers inside were spaced too evenly. I went back to my desk and opened my laptop. 4 years I'd managed my money the same way I'd managed everything else. Quietly, regularly, without drama. My bank app loaded. My accounts were still there. But a new authorized user line sat under my name. Carol. I stared at it for a long time, long enough to notice the exact timestamp on the last access. March 14th, 9:12 a.m. That date again. Like a flag planted in my calendar. I clicked into the activity log the way I used to click into invoice histories at work. Patterns don't lie if you let them speak. There were logins from a device I didn't recognize every few days, always mid-morning, always from the same location tag. An address across town, not mine. There were document downloads. There was a request for verification of identity that had already been completed. My hands were cold. I wrapped them around Mark's mug, even though the tea inside had gone flat. The ceramic was warm from the room, and that small warmth steadied me. I checked my email next. A folder I didn't remember creating sat in the sidebar. Home sale. Inside were messages neatly filed. Appointments. Photo approvals. Thank you for your prompt response. We have everything we need from the POA. I hadn't created that folder, but it was created from my account. Then I looked at my phone. The safety app had a settings page I'd never explored. I tapped through and felt a slow, sick understanding settle in. Location sharing was set to always. Notifications were set to alert them if I left a certain radius. Another setting allowed remote access. Someone could change permissions from a linked account. It wasn't care. It was a leash. I sat down at the kitchen table and tried to remember the last few months like a string of beads, counting backward. Emily insisting on helping with paperwork. Ryan taking my mail. Aunt Carol dropping by with pastries and 2 bright smiles, asking questions about my plans, my future, my comfort. Emily saying, "We're just trying to make things easier for you, Mom." Ryan adding, "It's not a big deal." It had been a big deal. It had been a slow takeover, dressed in soft words. I went to the garage because I couldn't breathe in the house. The air out there was cooler, smelling of dust and motor oil. The overhead light buzzed when I flipped the switch. Boxes were stacked along the wall where Ryan had stored his things. I noticed, with a strange clarity, that some had been moved. The tape lines didn't match. The corners were new. Mark's old suitcase sat on the shelf above the workbench, the one he used for business trips back when we still dreamed about taking one together. I pulled it down and set it on the concrete floor. The handle was scuffed. The zipper stuck the way it always had. I opened it. Inside were a few things I hadn't touched in years. Mark's tie in a plastic sleeve, a folded map of the California coast, a photo booth strip of us laughing like we were young and immortal. Underneath, wrapped in a soft cloth, was a small envelope of important documents I'd kept because I didn't trust fireproof boxes to stay fireproof. The deed copy, insurance papers, my original will, the real papers with my handwriting on the tabs. I held that envelope like it weighed more than paper, because in a way it did. It was proof that I had not lost my mind, proof that I had lived a real life and managed it well. I closed the suitcase slowly. The zipper caught, then slid. The sound was final, like a door clicking shut. And in that dim garage, with my husband's suitcase under my palm and my children's lies in my phone, I understood the truth I'd been avoiding. They weren't confused. They weren't helping. They were organized. They had a plan, and I was the obstacle inside it. I didn't feel hysterical. I didn't even cry. What I felt was colder than sadness and cleaner than anger. Clarity. I was done explaining why I deserved my own life. My phone buzzed against the workbench, the screen lighting the shadows. A message from Emily. "Everything all right, Mom?" 3 minutes earlier she'd typed it, as if she could sense me touching the edges of her secret. I stared at the words until the screen dimmed. Then Ryan, "Hey, don't stress. We'll talk soon." Soon was where they stored anything that required honesty. I set the phone face down and listened to the garage settle. A car rolled past on our street. A dog barked once. The ordinary sounds made my throat ache because the world hadn't cracked, only my family had. The truth formed in one clean sentence. They believed I would rather be loved than be respected. And I understood, with a steadiness that surprised me, that I could no longer afford that bargain. I took the envelope from Mark's suitcase and pressed it to my chest, feeling the paper edges through the cloth. "All right," I whispered, not to them but to myself. It wasn't surrender. It was permission. I turned off the garage light and walked back into the house as the owner of my name, my money, and my story here. I didn't answer Emily's message. I didn't call Ryan back. I left my phone face down on the counter and washed my mug as if it were any other evening. The water ran hot. The lavender soap smelled the same as always. I wanted my hands to remember normal things while my mind learned a new one. In my bedroom, I pulled my small safe from the back of the closet and set it on the bedspread. The metal was cool. The keypad beeped softly as I entered the code mark I had chosen years ago. Inside were passports, my birth certificate, the title to my car, and the folder from his suitcase, the one I just held like a life raft. I made a list the way I used to at work when something went wrong: what matters, what moves, what must be locked down first. I wrote it on a yellow notepad with a pen that still had the cap on because I was not going to be dramatic. I was going to be accurate. Bank. Deed. Power of attorney. Will. Phone access. At 7:43 p.m. I called my bank's fraud department. My voice was steady. I gave dates, amounts, and names. I asked for the activity log. I asked for the device list. I asked them to remove any authorized users immediately and to flag every account for additional verification. The woman on the line didn't sound shocked. She sounded trained. "Mrs. Parker, I can help you secure the accounts right now," she said. And for the first time that day, I felt something close to relief. Not because it was fixed, because someone was listening. At 8:15 p.m. I changed every password I could remember, then every password I had to reset. I turned on two-factor authentication. I removed the safety app's permissions one by one, like unclasping links from a chain. At 8:52 p.m. I emailed the realtor from my own account. One short paragraph. I stated that I had not authorized a sale, that any power of attorney being presented was disputed, and that all activity must stop until legal counsel confirmed otherwise. I attached a scanned copy of my driver's license and wrote plainly that I would be pursuing fraud claims if needed. Then I called a lawyer. Not a family friend. Not anyone Carol might know. I searched online for estate attorneys in Scottsdale, and chose one with plain language on their website, and a receptionist who didn't interrupt me. The appointment was for the next morning at 9:30. That night I slept badly, but I slept with my purse and my document folder beside the bed. When dawn came, it didn't feel like a rescue. Felt like a deadline. In the lawyer's office, I laid everything out. The listing email, the bank logs, the POA paperwork I'd been shown, the wording about my competence. The attorney, Mr. Sanchez, read without flinching. He asked questions that were quiet and exact. Did you ever sign a durable power of attorney? Did you ever see a physician who declared you incapable? Has anyone had access to your email? No, I said. No. Yes. He nodded once. Then we act today. By noon, we had drafted revocations, notices, and a formal demand to cease and desist. We filed to revoke any existing authorizations and to notify financial institutions and the realtor in writing. We scheduled a medical capacity evaluation, not because I doubted myself, but because I refused to let their story stand unchallenged. 2:10 p.m. We updated my will. I didn't do it out of spite. I did it out of truth. I left my children what I considered fair. Sentimental items, a modest sum, nothing that could be used as a reward for taking my life apart while I was still living it. At 3:40 p.m. I changed the locks. I didn't ask permission. I didn't announce it. The locksmith was a kind man with sunburned arms who worked quickly and didn't pry. When he handed me the new keys, their weight felt honest. Before I packed, I walked through the house with a notebook and wrote down what belonged to me. Serial numbers, account numbers, the names on utility bills. I photographed the rooms the way they had been before the staging. My own lamp, my own quilt, my own family picture back on the wall. At the post office website, I placed a temporary hold on my mail and redirected it to a private box. Quiet steps, one after another, like laying stones across water. I kept the receipts in the same folder, dated and clipped too. At 5:05 p.m. I packed a suitcase, Mark's old one. Not because I was clinging to the past, but because it reminded me that I had survived worse days than this. I folded my clothes neatly. I tucked the photo booth strip into the inside pocket. I placed my lavender lotion in the side pouch like a small promise. I left a single note on the kitchen table, under the fruit bowl. I am safe. Do not contact me until my attorney reaches out. No explanations. No pleading. No open door. Then I drove away, not fast, not frightened, just finished. I watched the neighborhood recede in the mirror and felt something I hadn't felt in months. My life returning to my own hands. The consequences didn't arrive with shouting or slammed doors. They arrived quietly, the way truth usually does, carrying paperwork instead of apologies. 3 days after I left, the realtor withdrew the listing. 2 days after that, the bank froze the accounts connected to the disputed authorizations. The sale unraveled not with drama, but with emails that began, due to irregularities and pending investigation. Emily called first. I recognized the number immediately, even though I told myself I wouldn't. The phone buzzed on the nightstand of the small furnished apartment I'd rented under my maiden name. The lamp was low. The room smelled faintly of detergent and unfamiliar carpet. I let it ring until it stopped. She called again an hour later. Then she texted, "Mom, please call me. There's been a misunderstanding." Misunderstanding. That was the word people used when a plan failed. Ryan waited until the next morning. His message was longer, carefully worded, like something practiced in front of a mirror. "We didn't mean for things to go this far. Aunt Carol said this was the safest option. We were trying to protect you. Protect me from what, he didn't say. By the end of the week, Carol's lawyer reached out to mine. The tone was suddenly respectful, the requests cautious. They wanted to clarify. They wanted to resolve. They wanted to know whether I would be open to a conversation. I declined. What followed were practical consequences that no one had prepared for. Ryan's credit card was declined when he tried to pay for a flight he booked using the account he thought would still be available. Emily discovered that the apartment deposit she'd promised the landlord was now inaccessible. Carol's access to my finances was formally revoked, and the medical capacity evaluation, conducted by a physician who spoke to me like an adult, came back clear and unambiguous. Competent. Independent. Sound. That word, competent, appeared in writing more than once. Each time it felt like a small correction to the record of my life. They began to sound different after that. The confidence drained first. Then the certainty. Their messages softened. We just want to talk. We miss you. Family shouldn't be like this. I didn't block them. I let the messages sit. I read them once, then placed the phone face down and went on with my day. There were groceries to buy. There was a library card to replace. There were mornings where I walked by the river and let the sun warm my shoulders without anyone tracking where I went. When Emily finally asked to meet, it wasn't framed as a demand. It was a request. She suggested a cafe halfway between where I was staying and the old house. Neutral ground. She said she wanted to explain. I told my lawyer no. The truth was there was nothing left to explain. Their actions had spoken in full sentences. A week later, Carol sent a handwritten letter. The paper was thick. The handwriting slanted and careful. She wrote about love, about family duty, about how hard it was to watch someone decline. She did not apologize. She asked me to reconsider for the sake of peace. I filed the letter with the rest of the documents. Peace, I had learned, was not something you preserved by surrendering it. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was instructive. Without my access, their plans stalled. Without my compliance, their story collapsed. People asked questions they couldn't answer cleanly. Paper trails led back to them. I heard, through my attorney, that the investigation would likely conclude without criminal charges if restitution was made and cooperation continued. I didn't push for spectacle. I pushed for separation. Their remorse arrived late, and it arrived when the leverage was gone. That was how I knew it wasn't remorse at all. I folded their last messages into the same mental drawer where I kept old disappointments and closed it gently. The world kept moving. And for the first time in a long while, it moved without asking anything from me. When Emily finally stood in front of me again weeks later, she looked smaller. Not thinner, not weaker, just reduced, as if the certainty she once carried had been set down somewhere and forgotten. We met in the lobby of my attorney's building, a place chosen for its neutrality. No family photos, no shared history on the walls. She started to cry before she finished saying my name. I didn't think it would hurt you like this, she said, pressing her fingers together until they turned pale. We thought we were helping. I listened. I truly did. I watched her face, the familiar lines around her mouth, the expression she'd worn as a child when she'd been caught doing something she couldn't undo. I let the silence stretch long enough for the air to settle. You didn't ask, I said finally. My voice didn't rise. It didn't shake. You decided. Ryan stood a few steps behind her, hands in his pockets, eyes moving the way they always had when he wanted to escape a room. He nodded once like someone agreeing with a weather report. We were scared, he said. Aunt Carol said. I raised my hand gently, not to stop him but to steady myself. This isn't about Carol, I said. This is about you deciding I was already gone. They looked at me then, really looked, as if expecting to see the version of me they had written into their papers. Confused, fragile, grateful for direction. I wasn't any of those things. I told them what I was willing to do and what I was not. I would maintain limited contact through clear boundaries. Financial matters were closed. Decisions about my life were mine alone. Any future relationship would exist only if it included respect, not supervision. Emily asked if I could forgive them. I considered the question carefully because forgiveness is a word people like to use when they mean erasure. I thought of my house staged like a stranger's, my name signed by another hand, the word competent printed as if it were a favor. I'm not angry, I said, but I'm not pretending this didn't happen. That was my choice. Not punishment. Not revenge. Accuracy. We didn't hug when we parted. There were no promises about holidays or calls. Just an understanding, quiet and incomplete, like a bridge that hadn't been finished yet. Later, alone in my apartment, I unpacked my suitcase for good. I placed Mark's photo on the dresser. I lined my shoes neatly by the door. I cooked dinner for one and ate it at the table without rushing. Outside, someone laughed. Somewhere, a bus sighed to a stop. I had chosen myself. Not dramatically. Not loudly. Just firmly. And that choice, I learned, was enough. I live more quietly now, but it is a chosen quiet, not one imposed on me. My days have a shape again. Morning light through unfamiliar curtains. Coffee in Mark's chipped mug. Walks taken without being counted or recorded. I volunteer twice a week at the library, shelving books, breathing in paper and glue, and the calm order of things that are allowed to stay where they belong. Sometimes I think about the sentence my daughter spoke so easily that day. You are nothing to us. It used to echo. Now it doesn't. Words only have power when we agree to carry them, and I set that one down. What surprised me most was not their betrayal, but my own steadiness after it. I learned that dignity isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself or demand witnesses. It shows up when you lock a door without explaining why. When you sign your own name and recognize it. When you choose accuracy over comfort and sleep anyway. I didn't lose my family that day. I lost an illusion. And in its place, I gained something sturdier. If you are listening to this and feel a familiar tightening in your chest, know this. You are allowed to take yourself seriously. You are allowed to protect what you built. Love does not require your disappearance. They said I was nothing. But those words forced me to remember who I truly am. And if this story touched a nerve, you belong here. Subscribe to hear truths where silence becomes strength.